welcome to the second panel of this conference, a panel dedicated to the subject media funding and plurality. And I have three panelists here. Eva Wagner, you already know from her talk. And to my right, you see Dr. Wolfgang Kreißig, who is the director or president of the State Media Authority of Baden-Württemberg in Stuttgart. And at the same time, he is the president or the director of the Conference of Directors of the German State Media Authorities. So I think we shouldn't go too much into detail about the German structure of media supervision, because this would fill a conference for itself. It's a very complicated subject. And to his right, you have Joanna Kulesza. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, perfectly, thank you. She is professor at the University of Lodz, and she is specialized in media law and in cyber law. And from your curriculum vitae, I learned that you are a member in so many committees and bodies, especially on the EU level, that I cannot quote them all here in this at this moment. So I would like to start with Wolfgang Kreißig. In the preparation of this panel, you said you would like to talk about the idea of state-funded media. We had this subject already yesterday from an academic perspective, and I think it will be very interesting for us now to learn what someone from the practice has to say to this topic. Wolfgang, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, March. So should I start with this state-funded media, or should I just get some other ideas as well? So, as you like.
It's up to you.
But, okay. Yeah, I have some ideas I want to share with you, and I will address this point of state-funded media as well. Maybe I start with the European level, because Eva Wagner just pointed out or focused on the EMFA, and of course for us as the media authority, and it seems like I'm the only non-scientist here on the panel or in this room. So I have more like the viewpoint from the practice and of course a political viewpoint. And indeed, we were seeing the EMFA really critical, because we thought for Germany, we wouldn't need to have an EMFA. And our impression was that, the European level just, looked very much to Hungary and Poland and the developments there, and set up this EMFA for this reason. And in Germany, we would say, well, we are set good enough to deal with these problems. But anyways, we see this, that on the European level, we have a need to safeguard the independency of media. And that's where the EMFA focuses. And this is not really the topic in Germany. In Germany, we realize that the plurality of media can only be granted if we react on changing media consumption habits and on the disappearance of technical limits. The latter means that we have a huge plurality on different media providers. So coming to the question of funding, the problem is not anymore to get the technical transport of content on a platform or via cable or satellite. The keyword here is the must-carry obligation we know. So there is a must-carry obligation so that media can be on every means of transportation. But now, as we have so many content, the different contents, this is not the main problem anymore. The main problem is to be found within this, all the huge mass of content. So we tried in Germany to react to this situation and to the habits of using media through intermediaries and media platforms, and the need to must be found. And so in Germany, we reacted to this situation with a new interstate media treaty that implemented some new, or even you could say unique, regulation. For example, the German Länder created a unique public value regulation. The regulation says that, for example, all public service broadcasters are public value, and all other commercial or private content providers can apply for the status of being public value. And so it's our task as media authorities to point out those private media content which is public value, and they have to apply to get this status. And the benefit of this status is that on all user interfaces, for example, on smart TVs or on car entertainment systems, these public value programs must be found easily. So the idea behind is to give credit for quality in the content by a better foundability, and as a result, a better chance of refunding. And this is one example how we dealt with this in Germany. So in fact, there were more than 300 private media companies that applied for this status of public value. And we had more than 200 content providers who got this status, and now we are about to implement this regulation. We are talking to car suppliers, to smart TV suppliers, and they are newly regulated. So we first have to explain why they are regulated at all. So it's a really new, unique regulation. And the idea is indeed to find those quality contents, and we are just about to find out if this new regulation will really find the goal and will contribute to a better funding of private companies. This is one of these ideas, which I think you find this idea of public value in the EU regulation as well. But I think in Germany, we are the first country who really addresses this topic of the foundability of this content. This is one example. The other example is that we also deal with media intermediaries. We have surveys that more and more people are finding their information through intermediaries like Google, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. And so we have to address this kind of habits, and therefore in the new interstate media treaty, we said that those intermediaries are not allowed to discriminate any information or any quality content. So they have to make transparent how they address or adjust their algorithms, and they're not allowed to systematically discriminate certain content. Of course, it is maybe hard to find out if something is discriminated, but we already had a case of Google, so we'll see how the court decided this case. But this is one of our answers to the new habits of how media is used. So we need to get new perspectives of regulation. And the last idea, that's the point that Ralf just mentioned, is that we realize that to create media plurality in the local or regional sector, we need to get some public money in this field, because at least in the TV area, we see this like local and regional TV companies are not competitive anymore. They are not able to get refunded just by advertising, because there's no market anymore. And still we have this aim to have plurality on this level as well. So we decided to support this local regional media by public money. But this is not an easy task, as normally in Germany, it's not allowed that the state finances and influences media. Wagner just pointed it out, that it has to be a media independence from the state. So we needed to get a construction how to fund private media and still have this independency. So the idea was to give the public money to the media authorities. We are independent, and we are independent from the state as well. So this is the idea, to give us the money, and we give it to the private media sector. Of course, this is not considering the law not easy at all, because you have to comply to EU rights as well. This kind of funding is not allowed to interfere with the market, but as we don't really have a market in this regional field, we think we can do it. But we have to have a legislation on it, that we have to kind of, this media must be entrusted to fulfill a certain task for local information. And with this construction, we can put it legally okay. As I sit close to Ralf, he had a survey on this legal field, and in the end, you said it's okay to put it that way, even under EU law. And so that's what we did. And one example is Baden-Württemberg. The state of Baden-Württemberg spends 4.2 million euros a year. They give the money to us as a media authority, and we give it, contributed to 7 regional TV broadcasters, and they have the task to finance. I think it's like 20 or 30 minutes of local news every day, and so this is a kind of construction we use to have a local and regional TV in Germany, because without this refunding by the state, those companies were gone. So without this money, no plurality on this sector. And in other countries or in other Bundesländern, this is even worse. Even in the eastern part of Germany, we have more problems with the plurality. In Baden-Württemberg, it's already still okay, but we see other parts of Germany where we have less media, and the problem is bigger. So there are more and more Länder who thinks about funding those local regional companies, media companies by the state. So this is just like 2 ideas of the new interstate media treaty and this state-funded media that I wanted to raise, and maybe we discuss it later, and we have some more things to discuss maybe on the interstate media treaty, because we have some other solutions for this new world of funding as well.
Yes, thank you very much. So I have 2 points. The one is what we already discussed yesterday, the must be found issue, so to speak. And the second is the direct public funding of specific media, in this case, local and regional TV broadcaster. So I take this with me, and I would like to go, but first, before discussing it, I would like to go would like to come to Joanna. And in preparation of this panel discussion, you told me that you would like to speak about the funding of the public media in Poland. And I think we all in the room are very eager to learn what is your assessment of the current situation.
Great, thank you. Just let me start by expressing my thanks to Ralf particularly, but to Martin as well, for organizing this and for having me here, and to the wonderful organizing team. Thank you so much. Camille is crucial for setting this up. Thank you so much. I appreciate the theme, and I particularly appreciate the timing. We've had this conversation before. So my usual bubble that I find myself in is indeed cyber related. I have this little research center at the University of Lodz. So all discussions about AI and platforms are right up my alley. I love them. But this invitation comes from a little bit of a different angle. We talk about media funding as a reaction to wonderful, brilliant keynote from Eva. I'm going to apologize for the mess we have gotten you guys in. And I feel it's only relevant for me to try and explain why you have to deal with this awkward piece of legislation. I share Eva's concerns. It's by far not perfect. It could be much better, but I'm going to take 10 to 12 minutes. I've scheduled this more or less to account for the time that you've kindly suggested would be available, to show you a background or maybe a dark scenario that Europe, other countries might wish to avoid when faced, as you can see here, with challenges to the rule of law. So provocatively, I've put on a slide, deconstructing democracy with public media funding. Yes, but I do have a solution. It's getting better. So there's a bright light at the end of this tunnel. If we could go to the next slide, or first slide, if you will. Oh, we have a clicker. Thank you so much. Brilliant. All right, wonderful. I apologize for the slides on the panel, but I think it's going to be easier for me to show you what I'm trying to explain, and apologize for if I have a few pictures here. So Poland traditionally, as every other European democracy, still has, we always had since 1989, we thought there was no threat, an independent national media authority, the National Council for Radio and Television. And they are the guardian of freedom of expression, which is also the reason why I would mention them in the work that I do. So when there is a freedom of expression concern, the independent national media authority supervises both kinds of broadcasters. We have two kinds of broadcasters, public broadcasters, commercial broadcasters, nothing too exciting there. The public broadcasters operate on two platforms. We have the public radio, which is a set of sister companies, if you will, relatively independent, but all supervised by the same national media authority, and the public television, which is one company with regional delegated offices. And it's in a sense important because, as you will see in a moment, one of the first things that the Law and Justice Party did after the elections was reshuffle this relatively simple paradigm. They've added, I got this, a component to that paradigm. These are the reports of the attempted attack on the freedom of media in Poland. I'm certain you've seen them. I'm using the slides just for reference, so if you might be in any way seeking more information, this is the background. And most of these events have been reported, so this is just to kind of point you back in time. What the Law and Justice Party did is they introduced a new component to this relatively simple paradigm, the National Media Council. Now, this is concerning for two reasons. First, the National Media Authority is based on a constitutional provision, and it is mandated to supervise the independence of media in Poland, whether public or commercial. So introducing a new body that just governs public broadcasters was in violation of a constitution. That's an argument that still stands. Some of you were asking me, what are you Poles going to do about the challenges that you face? We will probably, as a first step, get rid of this new body that clearly violates the constitutional principles. But this was set up in 2017 with the sole intent to designate individuals on the publishing boards of public broadcasters. Everyone got fired. New, young, eager supporters of the Law and Justice parties were hired, and that's how you capture public media. Once you do capture public media and you hire the new people, you want to pay them well. So there was a shift in the budget. Money was taken away from literally cancer research and cancer treatment and given to public broadcasters. A huge outcry. This lovely lady there, and the face and the gesture she's making is again the face of that scandal. You can see it being used here for political purposes, that very image that depicts that the Law and Justice Party cared so much about funding public media and doing with it what they wished, that they did not refrain from taking money from cancer research and cancer treatment. This is, I know you guys like diagrams. I'm not very good at reading them, but this is just to show you how the funding for public media in Poland increased. Thank you so much. It does come with Polish currency there, but I've done my rough calculations. So in 2020, the rapid increase amounted to €500 million all of a sudden funded to public television alone. So for our circumstances, it's a huge increase, and that money was to be used for clearly funneling certain narrative through public media. So if we're talking about funneling money through public media for political purposes, that's the first step of the way. The second step of the way is the direct reason for why you have to deal with the EMFA right now. In 2016, there was a deal made where the government insisted on what they called repolonizing the media. So the German Verlagspresse Passa was deprived of having the control package over a media group called Polska Presse. And this lovely gentleman here on the right, Mr. Obajtek, an entrepreneur who first was tasked, previously holding minor political posts, he was first tasked to manage the Polish oil petroleum supplier, And then he was given Polska Presse to manage. Now, Polska Presse is interesting for two reasons. They run regional outlets, both of television, but primarily of printed press. You've talked here about supporting printed local press. We do that. We have strong governmental subsidies and governmental support. Just to show you how Mr. Obajtek is protecting the freedom of expression there, this is fresh news. It's in Polish. I think you might make out what it says. Here on the left, you can see yesterday's original headline on Dziennik.pl, a regional newspaper sort of targeted at a local audience that says the Germans want to buy Silesia. Are you guys buying Silesia? I hope not. Because this was highlighted on social media, I'll get to social media in a moment, that's one of the leading platforms there, they amended the title and specified that there are conversations around a football club called Silesia Wrocław, right? So if we're talking about disinformation, misleading the public, that's how public media funded with state funding would be ensuring those neutral communications. Now, the EMFA in Poland would be viewed as an attempt to attend to this challenge that we deeply appreciate. Eva might be perfectly right. It's too much for you and it might not be enough for us. So I do welcome a constructive discussion on how we might want to fix it. If we were meeting here in 2014, I would just share your concerns and we could brainstorm together on how to do it better. But what the EMFA does, it attends exactly to that challenge. Now, the transfer of Polska Presse was preceded by a decision of the Polish antitrust committee, the Office for Competition and Consumer Protection. It was them who recognized that selling Polska Presse would not endanger freedom of expression or would not aggregate too much of media in one hand, because the press is merely a platform for commercial communications, for advertising. And this is what you see in the EMFA as well. So the EMFA is trying to emphasize that media is not just about selling ads, but it is about cultural values, protecting freedom of expression. So it's explicitly attending to the trick that the Polish Office for Competition and Consumer Protection played on us, selling all of the local media into a politically designated candidate's hands. I'm being quite brief here, so I'm glad to elaborate, but that's a long story summarized here. The third step was to tax free commercial media. We do have strong independent commercial media led by a station called TVN. It is owned by an American cartel, an American consortium called Discovery. They have been one of the beacons of and leaders of opposition. So the Law and Justice Party wanted to tax them. In the midst of the pandemic, everyone moved online. So the Law and Justice Party said, okay, we will tax online ads. Who benefits most from online ads? Commercial media outlets, because the state-funded media had those subsidies we just discussed. So they wanted to introduce a tax on online ads, allegedly to subsidize the health department that they've just taken money from. This resulted in a protest. You might have seen it. It was called a Black Friday. All of the commercial media suppliers online and offline went black. So there was nothing, just a blank screen for 24 hours. Fortunately, that tax was not introduced. You would see protests around the world, including, for example, Madeleine Albright viewing this as an attempt to grab media freedom, to harm media freedom. The next step was what was called Lex TVN. You can see this here again. I apologize for the Wikipedia reference, but it's a relatively neutral description. As you can see, there's a long discussion there. The Law and Order Party, the Law and Justice Party, attempted to withhold a license for TVN, so the leading opposition broadcaster. TVN met the requirements, filed the request to have the license extended. The National Council took far too long to confirm it. They wanted to get rid of TVN by addressing a small caveat in national law that referred to jurisdiction. They said because the station, the company, Discovery, does not have a stable seat in Europe. They were literally renting an office in Amsterdam. So because it doesn't have a stable seat, we will not allow it. It was on the brink of getting rid of commercial media providers. That, again, did not happen, allegedly after an intervention from the Department of State. So how do we solve this? What do we do? I'm an optimist at heart. You already know this, right? So what are we going to do? Or how did we manage to, despite all of this, change the result of the last election? I was not very optimistic. I'm really relieved that we stand where we do. This is not to say that social media saved the day, not alone. It is a complex scenario with a lot of great work done by opposition leaders. So you have Notes for Poland is actually quite reliable. If you're looking for information, they publish in English and it's a good source. So there's a comprehensive analysis, and this is not to say that this lovely gentleman here on your right won the day. He did not. But there are a few online platforms that have been advocating for change and informing particularly young users about the political situation and the threats we're facing. I addressed this yesterday, sort of addressing the concern about the attention span of the younger generation. This last Polish election was won or was determined by the youngest voter group. 18 until 25 were those who went to vote, who voted for the opposition, and who changed, hopefully, the fate of the country in itself. They don't want the past we had, they want a different future. They don't communicate on the traditional platforms, they don't buy printed press. I'm not doing those statistics, but the fate that you've described here is ours as well. They do work on platforms like this. So this is the Instagram account of the lovely gentleman in the soft slippers you saw on the previous slide. He's funny, he's entertaining, he's brief, he does memes, short videos, but he speaks about, about the situation in the Polish Constitutional Court. We're not going there today, but that's how the message gets delivered. This is the leader of the far-right party, punchline of many jokes. So you will see this mode of communication convincing the young people to come to vote and possibly to influence the results of the election. Some of you have asked me, how are you going to build a coalition? What's going to happen with the government? So this is just to address that question. You can see here the results of the recent election. The Law and Justice Party won. That's the blue line at the top right there. So they have 35%. But they do not have the majority. You see this in the seats here. The blue seats are not enough for them to keep doing what they've been doing for the past 8 years. They were trying to build a coalition with the far-right party right here. The far-right party failed miserably. That's also young voters. So fortunately, the young voters voted for these three parties, and they will likely now be tasked to build a new government, to form a coalition, and to establish amendments. So that's where we stand politically. I was sharing that, sort of a joke yesterday as well. The Polish parliament is now in the 5th day of its new session. And in the last 5 days, it has gained, I'm sorry, but you have to kind of maybe consider this example, 70,000 YouTube followers. This is one of the memes here again. See, that's how we communicate in times of challenge. We've won with the Deutscher Bundestag. Yes. So now we have, well, yes, we've won by 1,000 subscribers. The Polish Sejm, the parliament, has more subscribers than the Bundestag. Yes, it's a joke, of course. But this shows you that the young people don't want to watch the Sejm on public television. Part of the public mission is to transmit the sittings of the Sejm, of the parliament, on public television. That's not where they watch it. They watch it here, they watch it on YouTube. Right now, the Sejm is going to get the silver button for over 100 subscriptions, and they want to auction it for social purposes. So it's a different landscape, a different scenario that emerged. You were talking about changing habits of consuming media. We've changed them in a way we never thought we would. The Polish public media, state-funded, still very well funded, as you can see here, with young reporters following a public mission, is alarmed by these developments. They are concerned that the circumstances are going to change. They have set up a hotline, freedom of expression, and they will stand for preserving the status quo, that they don't want the things to change. So this is just a heads up. If you see alarms coming from Poland that the freedom of public media is at stake, reach out and I'll keep you calm. That's all I have. Thank you very much. But this is just to address this complex scenario of how public media funding might impact democracy. and sort of an apology for why you have to deal with the EFTA. I think that was a little bit more than 12 minutes. Thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. So I learned from you that you, especially you, but probably also lots of other people in Poland are very much in favor of the EMFA. And I also learned that the situation with regard to social media or to internet media is quite different compared to our situation. That's at least my impression. Because I think in Germany, we wouldn't think of social media as being something that stabilizes democracy, but is more or less something that could be a threat to democracy. And in your country, obviously, social media plays an important role in order to stabilize society and the democratic system. We will certainly come back to this, but now I would like to integrate Eva as the third speaker on this panel into the discussion. And of course, I would like to give you the opportunity to make your remarks on what has been said before. But perhaps you let me, you give me the possibility to introduce one question that comes back to what Martin already asked with regard to this example of the gay videos that shall be distributed in Hungary. That's at least what I have in mind. I asked myself, or I wondered whether editorial rules in the different member states could be necessary in order to perhaps not ensure free movement of content, but in order to ensure free movement of capital. That means investment. So if I would be a German publisher, I think I would ask myself whether I would be willing to invest in Poland, where perhaps there is no real editorial freedom, or where I have to fear that the state tries to take influence on what I'm publishing. So wouldn't this be an argument in favor of rules regarding editorial harmonization in Europe?
Yeah, this would be sure a more convincing approach from the traditional internal market related conversations we had on media pluralism when it comes to the freedom of services. So from the internal market approach, if we have rules restricting the freedom of services in the member states, then we have a possibility to get rid of them. But it depends on how the obstacles on the freedom of services are created. Are they created by private individuals, as it would be the case with editorial lines in media companies, or is it the state which maintains the obstacles for the for media freedoms? And if there are the private individuals that somehow contravene freedom of services or something like that, it's a little bit more difficult. So we have to examine whether the state has to put pressure on private individuals to eliminate these barriers for the freedom of service. And that is a different approach than obliging the member state of the European Union to get rid of obstacles for freedom of service. So I think it's a little bit different discussion, but I'm with you on that one, that it's a more viable way to create competences for the European Union to get to grips with the problems concerning editorial freedom. But I still would think that the freedom of tendency for private media companies is enshrined in the fundamental rights as well. So we have a fundamental right to freedom of broadcasting or freedom of the press. And in my opinion, it also contains the right to have a freedom of tendency. So you can't oblige private media companies to be neutral on certain topics to a certain extent.
But do you think that the EMFA endangers this right of tendency? That's not my impression.
I'm not quite sure if it endangers, and perhaps it has no effect at all, then it wouldn't endanger anything. But if we have European guidelines that there has to be editorial freedoms in media companies, I'm not quite convinced how this could go well with the freedom of tendency. So where's the barrier where you can say the freedom of tendency is enshrined in fundamental freedoms, and then you have to have editorial guidelines which oblige private media owners to be neutral on some sorts of topics. So when you decide you're a media company and you want to exercise your right to freedom of expression, perhaps this also contains that you don't want to have certain topics in your program. That is constitutionally protected as well.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps I look in the audience, perhaps at this stage, we could give the possibility to the audience to ask questions before I start a second round.
Yeah, I have a question to Mr. Kreißig concerning the public value status. What are the results vis-a-vis online platforms? Are there any results in Facebook or Apple, or is it only concerning smart TV and smart cars? So
it's concerning every interface where like content is where you direct content. So if you turn on this smart TV, you have this interface, and of course the smart TV producer could maybe sell this interface to firms, and we didn't want it at least to be totally free. So we said, okay, on this first screen you need to have some part where you have this public value area where you can find it easily. So this is the construction, but it's not only on TVs, it's on audio speakers as well. So if you address a speaker and there is not something you can see, but it's an audiovisual interface, audio interface. If you tell them to find a certain radio station, it should be like if you speak to the speaker, it should be found there. So it's not only TV, it's audio as well. And if you have a car entertainment system, you have an interface as well where you can put radio or something else or Spotify, or there you have to find this as well. It's not about social media platforms. It's something like Vodafone if they have, or Magenta TV, and so something like that, but not like on a Google platform. There you don't have an interface like that.
Okay, so no app stores, no iOS interface.
No, not yet. Yes.
Another question? Or no? Okay, then I would like to ask Joanna. So you reported on this National Media Council, and what is your expectation? Will it be abolished by the new government, which hopefully will be a government led by Mr. Tusk and not by this other guy? So will it be abolished, and would it be in line with, or perhaps a more legal question, would this National Media Council, if it would be not abolished, be in line with the new Article 5 of the EMFA? What is your impression?
This is just to emphasize, we've always had, since 1997 with the new constitution, the National Media Authority, the Council for Radio and Broadcasting. And those were the guys and girls who would appoint the boards for public media. This substitute body was set up very quickly just to grab power. So I would assume that in order to restore legitimacy, we will get rid of that specific institution. Its place, again, will be taken by the National Broadcasting Authority, the Radio and Media Council that's been there forever. And they would be the ones who would represent Poland on a potential international council should it be set up according to the EMFA. So the legitimate, if you will, National Broadcasting Authority would be the representative then, instead of this new body that hopefully will be abolished. Does that answer your question? Yeah. All right.
100%.
Great.
So, Martin.
So I'm afraid it's a different question. I think I'm in general interested, which is probably not that much a discussion at the European level, but perhaps within each member state where we talk about providing funds. And I see some of the discussion is somewhat backward looking, is trying to put funds into media as we know it from the past. And I was wondering to what extent there is a discussion also thinking about something which some people may have problems of calling it journalistic content, but in the way it is consumed, it is journalistic content. I mean, it shapes opinions. It is a way of people of getting opinions or information. So for example, those people who call themselves YouTubers and do have some, say, political messages. Most of them wouldn't be called journalists, but still they play an important role for some at least. If there is any thinking of, well, possibly providing public funds as an incentive mechanism for providing valuable productions. You can do this, I guess, through prizes. I'm not sure what other instruments there are, but I'm wondering to what extent the view, for example, in the of the media regulators includes those kind of players which are outside the traditional sphere, but which also shape public opinion.
Yeah, it's a very good question indeed. There's a discussion how to address these people, because we realized, and there's a survey on it as well, that younger people, they don't use too much this classical ways of news and information. They look a little bit on the sides, as you discussed them. You know, there are some YouTubers or influencers, they may do relevant information as well. And it's not really classical media, so they always overlooked a little bit. And we indeed try to focus those guys to get in contact with them and maybe talk to them and maybe even fund them in means of maybe some journalistic things to learn, so that they get better in the things they do. Because we say the classical media is not good enough because you don't address all the people with those kind of media. You need to get to the to focus on other means of information. And indeed, we in Baden-Württemberg, for example, we have a media prize which focuses on journalistic works. And now we try to not only focus on classical media, we wanted to focus on influencers as well, to get in touch with them, to talk to them, to maybe, you know, give them some funds maybe. Indeed, because it's a broader variety of information which is used, and we need to get hold of those guys, indeed, and we try. But it's not too easy, because these influencers, they just don't want to be called journalists. Maybe they want to fit in the system, and so it's not really easy to get hold of them and try to get in touch with them and talk about how to do journalism better and focus on them. So there's a discussion, yes, but it's hard to address this new group of people.
Thank you. I would like to come back to this must be found issue. You just talked about it, and yesterday we also had a discussion, and I had the impression that there was a broad consent on the panel that must be found is one of the solutions for the future in order to ensure that value content, public value content can be found and is consumed by the media users. And you just described this German regulation which we have regarding media platforms, which is limited mostly to I would say traditional media content like TV and radio. However, even there, and this would be my question, even there I have the impression that we already face lots of problems while enforcing these provisions. Or what is your impression? You just talked about the car manufacturer. So a car manufacturer might be a media platform according to this regulation. And my impression is that it is not so easy to explain them that they have certain legal obligations now under our media regulation, because they do not see themselves as a relevant factor in this media distribution and media game. And so if we would extend now this must be found regulation to other platforms, like, for example, YouTube or the typical American digital platforms, wouldn't we just add new problems to the question whether this is enforceable or not?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we found that that's easier to address a regulation to those companies that are already regulated, like the telecoms or whatever. If you talk to them, they adjust to these kind of new regulation easier than others. But the funny thing is that with the car manufacturers, we really have a good exchange, and they are really willing to fulfill this or be compliant to this new regulation. The bigger problem, because they're sitting in Germany, like Mercedes, BMW, and so on, and others, Porsche, and VW, and they really are willing to comply to this regulation. The biggest problem we have with this is smart TVs, because they are in Asia, Samsung and those companies, and we have really hard time to address them, and they don't really understand why they get regulated now. And of course, it's always the same problem with this kind of regulation, that we have more and more global firms, and we put a really German regulation on them, and they say, yeah, but I have to comply to Germany, but I am global company. I can't just have regulation everywhere different. So it's always kind of, we have to, you have to bring them to get this regulation. It's not always easy. But we are optimistic actually with the manufacturers of cars. We will see with the smart TVs. But on the other hand, the advantage is in Germany, we have a really big market, an important market. And so we can put some pressure on them to be compliant because they have interest in our market. And so for us, it's maybe easier to imply such an regulation in comparison to smaller countries.
So just for out of ignorance, could you perhaps explain a little bit how this, even in the perhaps not the car manufacturer, that's too much looking into the future, perhaps. I mean, just how these must found will be really implemented or are implemented. So I'm wondering, what's the scope? I mean, are we talking, what kind of content are we talking about? And I guess it's difficult to really draw the line, and I'm wondering what's the practice.
Yeah, as it's indeed complex. The idea is indeed that, as I just told, like the smart TV is the easiest example. You know, we didn't want the smart TV manufacturer just decides who pays the most, and that will be found on his first screen, like Netflix. Okay, they are not even on the first screen, that they are on the advice to turn on the TV. This is even better. No, we didn't get any regulation on this, not yet. But on the first screen, of course, you find Netflix, you find Amazon, and so on the first screen, and there must be some place where we have some kind of way to address, or it must maybe it's like called public value programs, and then you go on this field, and then you have a list of public value programs that we decided that are public value, but it's the whole public broadcasters programs on it, and then the privates as well. If this regulation will really lead to the situation that we have a better foundability and a better revenue for advertising, the time will show if this is really will have an impact. We don't know yet because it's just started. You know.
Clarification question. So that's only for linear programming. It's also for non-linear programming.
It's for linear programs, and there is for...
It's for non-linear programs too, but only if they are placed on a media platform. Right. So it's a rather complex issue. but if you have content, for example, that is found through Google or to YouTube, this would probably not apply. No. So there's the line, and it's very difficult to distinguish what is an intermediary according to the German interstate media regulation, and what is a media platform. So this is the distinction between these two actors, these two enterprises on the market is hard to draw. So there's a little uncertainty, according, at least under my impression, there's a little uncertainty about these issues.
And maybe I can add one thing. We have a problem with the new European regulation as well. We have this Digital Services Act and the EMFA and so on. And so we have more media regulation on the European level. And now these global firms, they are regulated in Germany as well. And we say, this is German media regulation. And they tell us, well, but now we have the Digital Services Act, or maybe the EMFA. We are not regulated by Germany anymore. These days are gone. And so we have this conflict on this level as well, and we don't have the decisions yet by court how this will come out in the end.
So that's the next legal discussion on the horizon. I would like to pass this question later on to Eva, but first we have someone from the audience, Mr. Zayer.
Another clarification question. What are the criteria in which order the public value content is displayed? So the first one has an advantage against the 150th one, on the smart TV screen. Is it quality, or what is the
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. It should not be discriminating. So it could be an alphabetical order, for example, is an order which is okay. But we had indeed in this discussion with the public broadcasters, and so we tried to get a list of public value things which has an order with private and the public media programs. And so I think it's a list differentiated from the TASE. It's like information is in the first, or maybe it on TV it's the easiest. It's like the first public broadcasters, das erste in Germany, then the second, and then it's the RTL and so on. So we copied this list, which is already used now, and we set it together. So it's the only thing we say is it's not allowed to discriminate certain programs. It should be in order which you can which is not discriminatory. And so we made we made a list, and if the screens take this list, this is okay. So
does this answer your question? Yes. Okay. So Eva, now I'm interested in your opinion. What about the DSA and the German media law?
No, that's the point that Wolfgang Kreißig made. One of the side aspects of this upscaling to the European level is that on the national level, you can decide less and less. And one of the main concerns with the DSA, but also with the MFA, is that we have no control anymore on what we can do with the intermediaries or with social media. And if we're able to do the things you just described, so to oblige certain services to not discriminate certain contexts, so that we won't be able to do this anymore. But this actually depends on what the European level does. And there are normally two options. You can go to a so-called full harmonization. This is when the European level decides what is to do, and you have no options to deviate from it. Or you can take another approach and go for the minimum harmonization. That's the case when the EU draws some certain baselines and member states have some margin to do certain things differently. So the main goal at the MFA at the moment is to push back certain things that will end up in so-called the full harmonization and go to the Mindestharmonisation or the minimum harmonization. But as, for example, the Polish position would be minimum harmonization doesn't do us any good. We need to go to full harmonization, because then our government wouldn't be able to say anymore, we have done all that, but we do things now differently because we have a different cultural background, you have a different issue here, and then we might end up at the thing I said before, that it might be too much for some of the countries and too less for you, for example.
Could I immediately react? This is just to highlight, I fully agree with you. It's a rule of law issue. So if we didn't have this specific situation, and I regret that it's Poland and I happen to live here, but it's a paradigm of authoritarian guidebooks, right?
Yeah.
So that's how you impose authoritarian rule. So if there's a lesson to be learned there, it's to go back to the rule of law, because if we manage to come back indeed to what was before 2015, we can have this conversation. And I would love to learn more about how we regulate YouTube. Is there editorial responsibility? Should we include them? How do we fight Netflix and the global geopolitical landscape, etc.? Or I love TikTok, right? We could have those conversations again. But it seems as if there is an urgent matter, not just with Poland, but with, you mentioned all the countries that struggle with it. So it is a rule of law issue. It's not something we can fix with one specific regulation. So we're on the same page there.
Could I reply? Because the point you made is quite right. I was wondering during our conversation that I have to be fair, it's not a Polish or Hungarian problem, it's our problem as well. So we are so integrated in the European Union that your problems are our problems as well, and we have to face it together. So that's the main point. So we are now in a position that we have to evaluate which of our standards we could take back in with the overarching goal to make things better throughout whole Europe. So this is exactly the case what we are trying to balance out now.
I agree. It's the French example as well that we discussed yesterday, right? When there is clearly right-wing influence in the French market as well. Great, thank you.
Okay, is there a question from the audience? If not, oh yeah, Camille.
It's not so much about regulation per se, but I was very interested in the Polish case and the role of those influencers. And so what do you think make them want to get involved in political speech or in anything that's informative? Is it because, like, so first, how informative do you think they are? And why do you think that they do that? Is it just their own opinion that they want to share, or does it pay for them to be political? So I would be just interested to have your thoughts.
Thank you. So there's no external funding from them, right? The short answer to your question, why do they do it, is literally frustration. Right? We did different things because of that frustration. I started traveling around and doing these things, sort of explaining why things are the way they are and how we can attend to those. That's kind of what I do in my day job. They've always had those little accounts. The guy I showed you here is a professional philosopher and a poet, right? So he sort of did that. It was his form of art. Then we had the elections, and he expressed his frustration in a way that many people share. He's always been doing that. He uses a US platform for it. There is the question of him being shadowed banned, right? All of those things that we would normally discuss in a standard setting. But we've managed to overcome it, or he has managed to overcome it. The paradigms of social media have been played to the advantage of democracy in this sense. The second guy that's probably most influential is more interesting, because he was supporting a really old Polish satirical periodical, sort of like Charlie Hebdo, right? You would have that controversial graphics, all of that. And they moved online and they had a small account. They've always had a niche following, but they managed to appeal to the new audience with this very critical, straightforward communication. There is no external funding as such, to my best knowledge. I'm more than happy to research that further. It is based on the paradigm that Instagram or Facebook would have for the followers. So they do have the numbers. I can't tell you how much money they're making, but there's no instigation of there being foreign influence, right? Like, for example, the US is funding this, or Russians, none of that. So it's just using the traditional paradigms to build a platform, and they're tremendously influential. Just to give you an example, if there's a public funding for, just a few days ago, for dogs in shelters, instantly the whole request gets filled up by 500%, right? So they have a following that allows them to meet certain social or political agendas. There's more to that, but I'm going to stop here. Thank you. Great question.
So for the last round, I would like to come back to this issue of public money, of funding media with tax money. And I would like to ask Joanna first, if I understood you correctly, that in Poland you have such a tradition of publicly funding even private media. So could you please elaborate a little bit more on this issue?
So the public funding goes exclusively to public media, and the public media in law is tasked with what is called a public mission. And the public mission is a concept that we have developed post-1989. It goes hand in hand with the minimal quotas, everything you would find in the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, right? So sort of that component of the shared digital market. But the public funding for public media is cored in the concept of a public mission, and this includes education. So for example, if there's a show that's not very commercial, we still want it to air for the purpose of education. This includes supporting minorities. This includes supporting traditional Polish values. And this has been enshrined in the law since 1989's discussion. We had the media law adopted in 1991, utterly controversial, but it reflects the culture, if you will, right? So we've had those safeguards that entrust public media with a certain local mission, right? To support the rule of law. The National Media Council could intervene if media, both kinds of media, threaten the raison d'etat, the right of the state, the establishment of the state, which is very ambiguous, but we've always had that component. So the public mission allows for public funding to public media, for them, for example, to air, that's a discussion you and I had, parliamentary sittings, right? So when there's a hearing of the parliament, it's not very commercial, it doesn't sell well. So we fund them for them to be able to show it to the public for the purpose of transparency.
Okay, and Wolfgang, you just mentioned that in Baden-Württemberg, as well as in Bavaria, we have the system of funding local and regional TV broadcaster. And you also mentioned the problem that is implied with this funding, that there might be a distortion of competition on the media markets. But you told me that you monitored this issue recently, and I would be interested, what were the results and how did you do the monitoring?
Yeah, we just asked the other media companies in Baden-Württemberg if they felt some pressure in the competition because of this funding, and they told us it's the press companies, for example, or the radio stations, and we asked them, so how do you feel in the competition? Is there any change after we had this funding? And they say no, there's nothing. They feel nothing. And so this was like the way we talked about it, and of course it's like a new situation. In former days we had only public broadcasters which were funded by this broadcasting fees, and we had private media companies that were funded by advertising. And now indeed we have a hybrid. We have, because these private companies that were state funded get only also advertising money from advertising as well. So we have a new hybrid, which always say, and we just see this. The Constitution tells us that we need plurality, and if the market is not able to have this plurality because there's not money in the market. This is kind of the answer to create something that is hybrid, and we still think this is okay.
Martin?
Again, a clarification question. My understanding is that in a different way, there has been a hybrid format before, in the sense that certain content could receive public money, say movies, which are then shown in private channels, which receive some money. So in the way, on the content side, but please correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, that there has been a way of putting some public money into content production, which is then shown not necessarily with a public broadcaster, but maybe shown with a private broadcaster.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, they decide on their own what they are showing, so they get the money and they produce. Well, what it's in the law, in the Baden-Württemberg law, they say they have to provide 20 minutes of local information and stuff. So that's what they get the money for.
No, but I think my question was that prior to that, if you look, but that's not for the local stuff, but there has been subsidies, for example, for German movie production,
and,
and some of that ended up then with private broadcasters. So you could say that some content has been in the past been subsidized, which was then not necessarily shown on with the public broadcaster.
This is like some steps until the broadcaster has this movie, and here's directly the money from the state to us, and we give it to them. So it's just the money really short track to the broadcasters.
Yeah, I totally agree. But of course, this is another way of subsidizing the production of content, which then can be consumed by the audience. So, but when you say you contacted the other media like press media, radio media, and so on, and they said that they do not feel any effect of this subsidizing of TV broadcasters, that means that the advertising revenue or that the audience share didn't change, or what did they mean by this? Or both, perhaps?
I think it meant that they are still getting their advertising revenues like before. They don't get the people don't tell them no we don't want to do any advertising with you anymore because the local or regional TV is more attractive for our advertising, because it's not that attractive, and so there's no competition between radio, press, and this local regional TV.
So we're talking also about different markets, and
Right.
no user will cancel its subscription because he now consumes TV broadcaster, yeah, for press media, for example. Okay, so I would suggest also with a look on my watch, last possibility for questions from the audience. Martin is very active this morning.
No, I mean, we're talking about, but I would like to hear now this panel. I think that the issue popped up before. If there's indeed a particular need with certain types of content, and say more the investigative part, I mean, it's fine if you have the local news, but if they're just reading what they get in any case, there might not be that much value in them. So value is also created if resources are made available for investigative journalism and other kind of high quality value added activities. I'm wondering whether already now, or what are possible steps in doing so, in achieving this kind of additional material, additional content, which is apparently particularly important and lacking at the local level.
So your question is addressed to the panel in general, or to a specific person?
Everybody, of course, is invited to share their knowledge and ideas. But of course, I have been looking in one particular direction to see a first response.
I mean, okay. I mean, in the end, it's a media company who has to decide what for the company is quality, what kind of information, and of course, you need to get you need to have the funding to this extra mile investigative things, and of course. It seems that only the bigger players, like even the public broadcasters and others, or bigger press companies, can really afford this kind of journalism. In the local and regional area, there will be no possibility anymore to have this investigative journalism, because now we already see that this investigative journalism is made by some different companies who do it together, like this is not like an investigative network to to share, of course, the funding for that. So it's really expensive, and indeed it's only little companies who can afford it, because it doesn't make any money. You can put some advertising around it, so it's really, that's why we have this findability, because we see if you put quality, you don't really you don't get the money back for the invest you have, and as a benefit, they should have this findability to maybe get a little bit more invest for a refund for their invest in quality content.
I'll try to help out. I see Eva looking at me, so I'll
No.
respond to just to give you an answer. It's an interesting question, because again, the landscape that I deal with on daily basis is so different, right? We have heavy local funding that comes up with unique quality local journalism, right? The question is, who verifies the quality of that journalism? So there's heavy funding that to me does not return high quality investigative journalism. On the other hand, the journalism that is being done is done by commercial companies who cut down on costs, right? So these would be the independent service providers, including traditional printed press media outlets who've literally cut down on the printed issues of their local newspapers. There used to be a Łódź newspaper that would be offered by the independent publisher. They've cut down on that one, but they did largely move online and they do exploit platforms. So I will keep insisting that maybe there is a lesson to be learned on playing with the instruments that are available. I think that's our lesson there. But I listened to this conversation with interest because the landscape in Poland is so much different, right? So literally there's heavy funding to local journalism that does not return quality as we would have recognized it under any European standard. It's very close to propaganda, if you will. Literally Twitter or X is now flagging posts from Polish government or public media as fake news. They're giving context, right? So there is a headline like the one you've just seen. Germans are trying to buy Silesia. This is getting tagged on Twitter as fake news, right? So there is, and this is Wrocław, this is local news from Silesia, from a public broadcaster. So I don't have a good answer. It's a brilliant question. I'll take it home with me, but that's all I have. Thank you.
First, as I might add a few words to that, investigative journalism is actually the journalism that we really need in order to foster democratic society. But funding investigative journalism with public money is some sort of an ambiguous concept, because we have to make absolutely sure that there is no pressure or no golden rain or whatsoever deriving from that public funding to the investigative journalism. Because when we have a label funded investigative journalism, it will be read and it will be heard. And if there is some subtle way of influencing this investigative journalism when we give public money, that has to be we have to get rid of this altogether. So I think public money for investigative journalism is always an ambiguous concept, and I would prefer it's private money, or, as we have learned, no funding at all, and just exercising the freedom of expression that ends up perhaps mainly influencing the Polish. So, but I can see also the need for public funding in an area where if it's not possible to get investigative journalism at all, then we have to think about public funding investigative journalism, but we have to make sure that there is no state influence on this kind of stuff whatsoever.
Yes, well, I think these were good final words from the panelists. So I would like to thank you for this discussion on this very important and interesting topic. Thank you very much.